Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to set up a couple of formulas to handle calculating damage that we're going to be dealing and also calculating the crit hit chance. Say if we want to add a critical hit to our attacks, we want to know how often that can happen and also how much damage will be tacked on to our base damage, that kind of thing. Going to be very simple. May also have a little toughness thing where we can take off an amount of damage based on our toughness level. It's going to be very arbitrary because I don't necessarily have any planned progression for my stats, because this is more so just a base for a good simple RPG, and I don't really have this whole game planned around it. It's just a way to set it up so you can make your game happen. So you want to probably come up with your own formulas based on where you see your game going, based on how you want your difficulty to progress and how much impact you want certain stats to have on your combat and all of that. I'm just going to show you a couple of ways to handle calculating a couple things based on stats. So to do that, let's have a look at what I know I want to do. Is I was thinking about this, and what's bothering me is each weapon currently will have to handle calculating its own damage individually of all the other weapons. So if we change how we want to handle one stat, we'll have to go through each weapon and change it on those, and that just sounds terrible. So what I want to do is I want to set it up so that our weapon controller handles calculating our damage, and then it passes that damage to the weapon doing the damage. So if I open this up, and also the fireball would have to have the damage because projectiles are handled differently. The actual object does the damage, which makes sense if you think of it in a real world sense of objects. The actual projectile does do the damage, so I guess the projectile would also have to have the damage, which will be simple once you see how we do this. It'd be no problem making your projectiles do that. But also, this is going to mean that our weapons don't have to know of our character stats, because that also hasn't made any sense to me. It was more of a thing to quickly do to make it work, but I don't like that all of our weapons will have to know of our character stats. It just seems kind of backwards to me. So we won't have to have that, which is good. So if I go to my sword, in here, I have perform attack and then perform special attack, which we're not even using. I just set it up to show you how you could do it. And then I have this weird take damage thing happening here, which is taking the character's power level and doing that amount of damage. It makes no sense, as I said. And so what I want to do is in here, actually in our interface, I want to, let's go to this real fast, and I want to add, get rid of character stats. We don't need that. And perform attack will take a damage amount, because they're going to be calculating the value from the weapon controller and passing it to perform attack, and then that's going to be setting a property on our weapon that will determine how much damage is dealt if a collision is made. So it's going to be an integer, and it's going to be current damage, something like that, and it can't be public. And that should work, but I'm going to have a couple of errors because I have to implement that in our weapons, which is fine. So in sword, if I wanted to do that really fast, I could just say, yeah, go ahead and do that for me. And it will implement it, but I want to use an auto property, so we're going to do a get set. There we go. And also, perform attack will need a damage amount because it's taking the amount of damage from the weapon controller, and then it's going to set current damage to be equal to the damage passed in here. And we're only doing that so that it's available to our on-trigger enter. And we can get rid of that. I shouldn't have used that. It was fast if you do it that way. And it's going to take the damage value here, put it in the current damage. It's going to reference the damage from the perform attack. And that way, on-trigger enter, if it hits something, it'll say, okay, well, I know how much damage I'm doing. And if it doesn't, it doesn't matter. The reference is not impactful whatsoever. So I'm going to have a current damage is equal to damage. Cool. So then I could take current damage and pass it to take damage, which is on the enemy, saying, okay, now I hit the enemy, so I'm going to call the enemy's take damage method, and it's going to do this much damage. So in here, that looks good. Now we have to take that amount of damage from somewhere. So in weapon controller, Notice I can get rid of this now because there are no character stats. And also this requires an amount of damage to be taken. So to set that up, anything else broken? No, good, that's good. We're going to have a private method, keep it private for now, and it's going to return an integer, the damage value that we're going to be dealing. And I'm going to call it calculate damage. We'll calculate damage is fine. And it's going to just return an integer based on a couple of things. So I'm going to make an integer called damage to return, or damage to deal. And it's going to be equal to, and we're going to just create a random formula here. Again, not a whole lot of rhyme to this. It's just to show you how to work with stats. So if I wanted to take our character stats, which we have right here, as you can see, it's defined up here, grabbing the component, which is player. This is on the same player object, and getting the character stats from that. Pretty simple. So I can say character stats dot get stat. And we did this in the stat update video. And I want to get the stat. It's going to be base stat type. And I want to get power, because we have 3 stats in this game so far, and power is the most important one currently whenever we're dealing damage. So we're going to take that, and I could just be like, oh, okay, well, I want to multiply it by 2, and that's how much damage you deal. Right, so actually I can't do that. I have to do get calculated stat value, which I don't like that either. That's very verbose. I would like it to be a bit shorter than that and maybe less descriptive. But I like descriptive method names, so it's fine for now. So I can just multiply that by 2 and say, okay, so if you have 10 power, you're going to do 20 damage. The math was hard for me. And if you have 10 power, you're going to do 40 damage or whatever. That's fine, but it's very boring, right? It's up to you how you do this. But I want to add a bit of a random element to mine, and also I want to make sure I can calculate in a crit hit damage on top of the base damage, that kind of thing. And now I had a couple of these written up already, and they're all just, like I said, they're very arbitrary, but I'm just going to write up another one here off the top of my head. So we have the power. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add to the power. Let's take the power and say it's going to be power plus, no, I don't like that. We're going to multiply power by, how can we do this where it makes sense, kind of? If I take power and I multiply it by 2, let's say we have 10 power, then it's 20, and then I wanted to add a random bit onto that. I would just do an add. We're going to do a random.range, and we're going to this could be anything. In my case, I want it just to always be close to the same hit every time. So if I say I hit around 20s, I don't want to sometimes hit a 30 and sometimes hit a 10. That doesn't make any sense to me. I want to hit like a 20, a 19, 21, around there, but maybe not always the same, just kind of around that, you know? So I can do, we're going to add a range of 2 to 10. It's kind of off there. We'll do 2 to 8. And that's just going to take a value, say it's 10, so it's 20, and it's going to say, okay, well, I can hit 24, or I can hit 22, or I can hit 28. That kind of thing. That's fine. Kind of boring in the end. Now I could take all that and divide it by some kind of base value to keep everything down. So if I wanted to take all that and say, whatever we get from that, remember we're working with integers, but we can still work with some floats and then just cast them to ints. Whatever we get from that will be divided by 4. Which makes no sense because we're multiplying it by 2. So we won't do that. That's stupid. But you could do that, whatever you wanted to do. So mine's going to be very, very simple. And you could just say, okay, well, go ahead and return that. But that's going to be done after I have a calculate crit. Calculate crit. Okay, so this is going to take a damage parameter that's going to be from this. So I'm going to say damage to deal is equal to itself plus the result that we get from calculate crit. So it'll be calculate crit and then pass the damage to deal. Now, so if I have, say it calculates out to, I'm going to hit a 24. So I'm going to say, okay, damage to deal is equal to 24 plus whatever calculate crit gets me. So if I fail the dice roll and I don't actually get to hit a crit this time, the idea is that calculate crit will return a 0. Therefore, keeping my damage to deal the exact same. So it doesn't actually get a critical hit. But I want to also sometimes have a critical hit, maybe based on a percentage, which would be ideal. So if I wanted to do something like a percentage, I could say if random.value, random.value is going to give us a value between 0 and 1. So we can use that to calculate a percentage. So I'm going to say if that is greater than or equal to 0.2f, which means if when I get this random value, if it is great, and that's wrong. I want it to be less than or equal to. If it is less than or equal to 0.2, then we're going to have some critical hit damage. So it comes out to a 20% critical hit chance. Now you could calculate this hit chance based on, say you have a stat called crit percentage or something like that, like a lot of MMOs have. You can calculate this based on that. So if you have a high crit hit chance, then you have a higher chance of hitting. It just makes sense. So that you can multiply a base percentage by your crit hit chance to increase it based on your stat, whatever it may be. But in my case, I'm going to say actually that's pretty high. I want to say you have a 10% chance of critting every time. And maybe we'll have a crit hit power modifier kind of thing, so that we can make sure that we say we want to build for a crit hit, we can have weapons that have better crit hits than other weapons. That way, but then you couldn't increase the percentage without having a crit percent kind of thing. So maybe it's pointless. I don't know. Up to you, however you want to do it. So if it is in that 10% range, then I want to calculate a crit hit. So I'm going to return a value. And actually, I'd prefer to make the value first and then return it, because I don't like doing that all in one line. Crit damage is equal to, and I could take the damage value and add to the damage value. Let's say that I wanted to add damage times, do a random.range. We love random stuff. It makes everything feel a bit more not programmed, a bit more fluid. So damage times random.range, and I'm going to take anywhere from a quarter of the damage dealt to a half of the damage dealt, and I'm going to make that the additional damage that gets added to my damage. And actually, we don't want to add it to damage because we're going to be adding it to damage up here. That would just be doubling it. So what I want to do now is I have to cast this to an int. Now the way this is going to work is, because I'm calculating with floats in here, it's going to take damage, which is an integer, and it's going to make a float of it. But then we can't use that float to add to our crit damage and then therefore add to our damage to deal, because those are integers. So I have to cast it back to an integer before I add to it. So there we go, it's an integer, and I'm just going to return crit damage. Now this means if we do have that 10% roll, we're going to calculate a slightly random crit damage and return that amount of damage to be tacked on to our damage to deal. Otherwise, damage to deal stays the same. Pretty cool. I'm not really sure how other crit damages are dealt or handled, but that'll work for us for sure. So now I'm going to just return damage to deal. But because that's a integer for this, and I can also use this now to pass in here, and it will pass an integer to perform attack, which is exactly what we want. But every time I do this, for debugging purposes, for testing purposes, I want to know what damage is calculated to be dealt. So damage dealt is equal to damage to deal. So that should work, I think. Perhaps, maybe. Let's give it a shot, see what happens. Play, there's an error. Staff does not implement. Was it missing? Okay, first of all, we don't need this anymore. Yay. And it also needs the, what was it called? Current damage. And it also needs perform attack with an integer. Like that? Is that it? Okay. And then what else? Nothing for now. And I say for now because you know how it's going to go. So I'm getting attacked, which is fine. Cactus. Why is that called cactus? Okay, so I have my staff equipped, which wasn't an ideal choice for this because I don't have that set up. If you want your staff to work the same way, just follow how I just did this, but make it for the pass the damage value to your projectile. So I'm grab my sword, equip that. And now if I were to swing, it doesn't have to be at anything. Damage dealt is 76, 102, 73. The 102 is the crit damage. Notice how it's always staying about the same. I'm not critting very often. There is a crit. The crit's not very impressive. I like impressive crits. Now it could be based, like I said, it could be based on a stat. So you can get better crit damage based on what weapons you have equipped or whatever. So I want to just up this quite mightily there. And play that. The percentage stayed the same, but I just increased the amount of damage that it can deal. So 73, 124. Now it's pretty good. Okay, so it ranges from probably about 110 to 130, and my base damage ranges from about what 70 to 78 or something, 72 to 78, something like that. That's a lot of base damage to be dealing. I wonder what happens when I use this. Oh, I cannot equip it. Why can I not equip it? I know this is an error that we had in the past that we never fixed. So the stat bonuses were not being removed. Now, why is that? Because I can imagine I actually fixed this on the forum.gogameground.com, and if you didn't see that over there, shame on you. But if you didn't, the reason this is happening is because, well, first of all, equipped weapon and equipped weapon, that was ridiculous. Why did you guys let me do that? But it's kind of confusing now, right? But it's fine. You can change yours to whatever. But what we have to do is do equipped weapon, and we have to set the stats, because we've never set the stats for the weapon. If you notice, this has stats, and those stats are used to remove the stat whenever we swap a weapon. So if we have a weapon equipped, okay, so we have to remove the stat bonuses of the equipped weapon before we can equip the new weapon. That's required. And down here, then we'll add the stat bonuses of the item to equip. But we don't have stats added to the weapon. We add a stat bonus, but we don't have the actual weapon stats. We have the character stats, but not the weapon stats. So I'm going to do equipped weapon.stats is equal to item to equip.stats. And that's just going to give equipped weapon the reference to the actual stats of the weapon that is equipped. So that, I'm talking like I know for a fact that's going to fix it, but let's make sure. We have an error. Do we? No, we don't. Okay, so if I were to equip a weapon, boom. Then equip my sword, boom. So I swapped the weapons, no problem. And you'll notice that my staff did not go back into my inventory. That's something for another time. That is going to be included with around the same time as the character panel that we're going to be creating, because the character panel is going to have, it's going to understand what weapon is currently equipped. It's not going to handle it, but it's going to understand it. And when we get into that, we'll have to get into also giving the item back. And let me just look into this, how we can handle that. So the character stats, remove stat bonus if it's equipped, we'll do that. Why can't I just add the item when I do this? I don't even know how's our inventory handled. Like if I wanted to do an inventory, what is it, inventory controller dot give, no, it's doing instance dot give item, needs an item slug. Okay, well why can't I do item, or sorry, equipped weapon? That is a game object, and that is an eye weapon. All it needs, okay, so all this needs is it needs to know what is the slug of the item that was equipped. And we have a reference to the item to currently equip, but we convert that in a way to the equipped weapon. So a quick and dirty way to handle that, and I love quick and dirty ways. Item currently equipped item. Now I know this is just really confuses up the whole equipped weapon, and then we have another equipped thing. But I want to clean this up, but I just want to make it work for now. So if I take this, and whenever we do all this, I say that is equal to item to equip. But it's just going to be a reference to it. That's not going to work. No, it will, because we don't assign it yet. This should work. And then just get the item or object slug from that. And maybe that'll give us the item that we want. Again, not necessarily a permanent solution, but I'll see if this is how we can go about doing this. Not even on the table for this video. I just had a curious question. Okay, so well, that worked. And now you see the lag happening. I'm assuming, I'm going to hope that's due to all these logs happening. That's very intensive. Actually writing to a file every single time we do this. Let's get rid of some of these. Because a lot happens. Is that what the... A lot happens whenever we equip a weapon. So we're doing a bunch of logging. Let me get rid of this. If we open up the profiler, I'm pretty sure it's going to be it logging it out. Yeah. Oh, I didn't need to drink that. What's this? Get rid of that. All kinds of debugging things in here. I don't know if you guys have these or not. Let's see. Get rid of this too, because we no longer need that. Kinds of things happening. Really makes watching what's happening very difficult when there's things that we don't need in there. So if I were to equip my cactus, which is a cactus for some reason, and then I were to equip my sword, oh yeah, that's much better. No lag happening there. Cool. So it was on the logging happening. Cactus is a weapon. What? See, I don't know what that even is. But okay, so we knocked out a couple of issues in this video that wasn't planned. So you can swap out items and it'll add it back to your inventory. That's pretty cool. Wasn't planning on doing that, actually. But there you go. I drink this and it just goes away. You drank a swig at the potion. Alright, so we're going to wrap up this video. That was a couple of parts in one. Didn't mean to do that. Sorry about that. I just wanted to see if I could fix it really fast. And I can. We'll probably change the whole equipped weapon method. The functionality is there, but it's not pretty. I don't want to have to work in that method a year from now, let's say, and have it to remember what actually is happening in there. It's all a little magic. So I'll definitely want to change some of that stuff up. I may just change it and write up a post on the forum for you guys to check out instead of having to go through and refactor a bunch of stuff on video, because that didn't seem to go too well the last time we did the stats. A lot of errors people are having. So if you want to ask me a question, and I'm sure you do, there's lots of questions, A lot of things we just changed. You probably broke something. It happens. Go to GoGameGrind.com or go to forum.gogamegrind.com. That's the best place to get in touch. A lot of people there now. It's working out pretty good, and it's more than just me answering questions. So you'll get an answer much faster. And honestly, you'll probably never get an answer in the comment section, just because of how many videos get comments all the time. It's hard to keep up with. I love the comments. I'm not saying don't comment. I'm just saying don't ask technical questions in the comments. And if you want to support the channel, there's a new thing that I want you to look at. Not a new thing, it's on Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/gamegrind, you'll see my Patreon. And I just added recently a level 3, it's called Professional. It's $15, and you get 2 of my premium Unity assets, Journal and StatTrak. Journal's not even available in the asset store yet. It's still going through the review process. So this is currently the only way to get it. It's an achievement system. It's very simple. It's easy to get started. It takes a couple seconds to get it in your game. And all of the achievements are in JSON, right? But there's also a built-in editor, because I want you to become a patron and support the channel. So if you come to forum.gogamegrind.com, you can see the Getting Started guide for Journal. All very nice. And it takes you from installing it with a one-click installer, through setting up achievements, and then calling them throughout your game, depending on what kind of achievements you have. All very cool. Very simple. And it's a $15 asset on the asset store when it gets released. But currently you can get it and StatTrak. StatTrak is a stat tracking tool. If you were to get this, it's just like $250, I think, right now. But that's pretty much free with that current tier, and it's being really slow. It's just a stat tracking tool, so you can track any stat in your game. As you can see here, I have a video showing what's happening, but you can just create any kind of stat, and then you can simply track it, and it saves out the data for you and all that. Very simple to use. A lot of games have this just for fun or for debugging purposes or whatever. And it comes with a little tool to test stats and stuff like that. It's very simple. It's very cheap, but it comes with that. Or you can just buy it separately. That's cool too. Any questions about any of these assets, be sure to go to forum.gogamegrind.com. So that plenty of times now. Guys, I will see you in the next video, where we will probably start on, hopefully, the character panel, which is pretty crazy now. It's got I went a little overboard with it, but it's going to be fun. It may take us a while. It might take a couple of episodes. I'm not sure, but we have like our stats displayed. Then we have our health with like a cool radial health bar. Then we have our level with a cool radial experience bar, which we'll get into leveling in the future, but it's just there for now to show you how it's going to look. And then we have all of our character stats listed in the grid. And then we're going to have like our currently equipped weapon, and then the weapon stats and all that. It's going to be really nice, really fun. If you want to see that, be sure to subscribe. I have talked long enough. Thank you guys for watching. My name is Austin, and I will see you next time.